Dungeons are big underground mazes where some people go to find treasure while others fight the dark forces hiding inside. People who explore these giant caves looking for money get called adventurers, while those who beat the darkness get respected as heroes. Our main character, Luke, is proud of his 15 years as an adventurer, though things go wrong when the hero he joined to fight evil betrays him just a second ago. Now Luke lies on the ground, knocked out and left behind. A few hours earlier, someone comes to him and kicks him awake, calling him a useless third-rate adventurer. Luke gets up and inquires about what's going on. The hero stands there questioning him about the repel amulet. He explains that Luke was supposed to put it in the center of the camp. Luke insists he did put it exactly where he was told. The hero then gestures toward their packs, showing that monsters ate all their food. He accuses Luke of causing the mess, declaring that he is an idiot who put the amulet in the wrong place, leaving all their packs outside its protective area. Luke coughs and claims he has no idea what's happening. The hero turns to Julia, asking her to confirm how much food they have left. Julia responds that they probably won't have enough to get back to the surface once they finish their mission here. The hero shouts, demanding to know how they are supposed to fix this problem. Luke reiterates that he did exactly what the hero told him to do. Julia steps in, challenging whether Luke really thinks excuses will help him. Luke indicates the rocks he stacked to make a stand at the center of the camp, demonstrating that the amulet must have been moved after he set it down. He reminds the hero about getting thirsty last night and going to the packs for a drink, suggesting something might have been knocked over then. The hero pauses, admitting it's possible something like that happened. Our dude starts to argue that if that's true, then the hero shouldn't blame him. Suddenly, a girl from behind casts a paralysis spell. Luke screams and turns around as the hero remarks that it doesn't matter who's to blame. Two girls stand there now, and the hero keeps talking, asserting that what happens next matters more, then seeking confirmation from his sister. Both girls agree right away. One girl states that if there isn't enough food, then they should make their group smaller. Luke questions what she means, and she clarifies that they have a perfect person to sacrifice, pointing toward their boy. The hero judges it as a reasonable decision. Julia adds that having one fewer person means their food will last longer. The hero follows up by noting that losing someone whose only ability is repair won't make much difference anyway. He then gives Luke a sword, calling it a final act of mercy, and remarks that he doesn't even want payment for it. Luke is left in disbelief, unable to grasp how he has ended up in this situation. When the paralysis spell finally fades, his thoughts turn inward. He knows it's true that he really is a low-rank adventurer. 15 years have passed, and he's still only E rank. Repair is the only skill he has. If he were to die here, no one would notice. The guild wouldn't care. Even so, being treated like this is unbearable. He decides he won't accept death here. He will survive and escape this dungeon. He checks the sword they abandoned him with and sees that it's old and poorly made. Before anything else, the blade needs fixing. They didn't take his iron powder, and that small mistake gives him hope. Using his repair skill, he restores the sword and decides it should be usable. He knows he can't fight strong monsters, so he plans to avoid encounters altogether. No matter how long it takes, even if it takes days, he'll move slowly and quietly until he finds his way out. 2 weeks go by. Luke grows weak and painfully hungry. He realizes he hasn't eaten anything at all during this time. He's only stayed alive because of the magical water flowing through the dungeon. There's no point in turning back now. His foot suddenly strikes a scattered skeleton, and the impact startles him. Before he can react, the bones pull together and rise into a towering undead form. Instinct carries him through the moment, and he manages to shatter it with a single desperate swing. Once the creature collapses into pieces, he notices the edge of his sword has worn down again. After so many repairs, the blade barely holds itself together, and the pouch of iron powder is finally empty. He tries repairing the sword anyway, but the skill refuses to activate. Panic hits him sharply until the blade suddenly reforms on the second attempt. That strange delay forces him to think about how the skill actually works. He recalls hearing somewhere that repair temporarily breaks down both the damaged portion and the virgin material, then reconstructs them into the original shape. As he examines the dungeon wall, he wonders what would happen if the wall itself became the replacement material. A memory flashes through his mind. The hero once tried smashing the same type of wall out of impatience, and Julia warned him that the weapon would break. The hero casually replied that Luke could just fix it afterwards, as if that was Luke's only use. Thinking about that moment makes Luke place his hand on the wall and activate the skill on impulse. The solid rock cracks apart instantly, shocking him. Even the hero could not damage these walls, yet his repair skill just forced them to break. He picks up a fragment and realizes it feels more like metal than stone. The possibility hits him at once. The skill must have changed. He does not understand why, but it clearly allows him to use materials he never could before. If he can replace parts of a sword with something this durable, then that weapon might become powerful enough to rely on. He experiments again by pressing the sword against the wall and activating repair. The wall remains untouched, but the blade comes out flawless. The durability is far beyond what he had earlier. With this new advantage, he begins carving openings in the walls and moving through quieter passages. Simply being able to control where he walks instead of following the usual routes drastically improves his chances of survival. He gathers fragments of the broken walls to use as spare material and continues deeper with renewed determination. Curiosity leads him to test the decomposition side of the skill on the poisonous lichen. When he focuses on it, the moss dissolves slightly, but the process is weak and unstable. He realizes that living things resist magic because of their own natural energy, so the skill struggles to break them down. Since repair was never meant to affect living bodies in the first place, he assumes there will never be a reason to force it further. For now, escaping the dungeon matters more than anything else. After more searching, he finally reaches a staircase leading upward. Every step feels like a battle, but the moment he climbs out into sunlight, he feels a rush of relief. For the first time in weeks, he breathes fresh air. Yet his body is shutting down from hunger, and he knows he needs food immediately. He grabs a berry from a nearby tree, but something in his instincts warns him it is rotten. That realization surprises him, since he has never possessed that kind of intuition before. Before he can think it through, a distant scream echoes from somewhere nearby. He forces his body to move toward the sound, believing someone might be in danger. As he approaches, he sees two girls struggling against a massive creature. One tries to push the other away, insisting she escape, but neither of them can leave because the threat is right in front of them. When Luke recognizes the enormous shadow as a dragon, his breath stops. Dragons are creatures that normally never leave their own dungeons, so the sight of one in the open leaves him frozen. One of the girls can barely stand, her sword snapped in half, and her body covered in injuries. Luke watches her stagger forward even though she clearly cannot fight in her condition. The scene forces him to act. He throws a chunk of metal toward the dragon, hoping to distract it, but the attempt does nothing. Realizing the girl's state is worsening by the second, he tosses his own reinforced sword toward her. She catches it with trembling hands and charges the dragon without hesitation. Her movements show the strength of someone used to fighting, and she manages to bring the beast down with the blade he repaired. The other girl rushes toward her companion with relief while Luke approaches cautiously. The injured girl offers him thanks with a weak smile before collapsing. Her body hits the ground hard, and the sight makes the remaining girl panic. Luke examines the wound and determines that her condition is critical. He has no healing magic, and neither does the other girl, so both recognize they have no means to save her. In that moment, Luke remembers what happened to the lichen inside the dungeon. Even though living things resist magic, his repair skill still managed to force a partial decomposition. The thought terrifies him, but he acknowledges that this girl will die if nothing is done. He weighs the risks, decides that trying is better than watching her bleed out, and steadies his hands. He focuses every bit of his will into the repair skill, aiming it at her injuries while repeating to himself that this is the only chance she has. That single decision becomes the moment that changes his life. Luke places his hand above the wounded girl and forces the repair skill to activate. The effect starts slowly as if her body pushes the magic away, but he keeps his focus steady. He reminds himself that giving up now means letting her die in front of him, just like the many adventurers he watched fade away over the years. Those memories push him to hold the activation longer than he ever has. The light of the skill spreads unevenly across her torso, breaking down the damaged flesh and reorganizing it piece by piece. The effort strains him so hard that his vision starts to blur, but he refuses to stop. He has spent 15 years feeling useless, watching stronger people risk their lives while he stood helplessly at the edge. Every loss he ever witnessed returns to him at once. Voices begging not to die, faces twisted in pain, moments where he could do nothing but stare. He realizes that he cannot bear the thought of watching this girl fall the same way. As the decomposition continues, the wound begins to close from within, reconstructing itself according to the pattern of her uninjured body. Our main character then opens his eyes later and struggles to piece together what happened. He remembers using his skill, then losing consciousness immediately afterward, and now he lies on an unfamiliar bed. He studies the room in confusion, trying to understand his surroundings. Sylvia enters at that moment and notices him awake. She informs him that he is in her house, the Spring Leaves Inn, and adds that he has been asleep for nearly half a day, which made her worry. Luke offers an apology right away, believing he needs to leave because he has no money, and he tries to free her from the trouble of hosting him. Sylvia assures him that she does not want payment, and reminds him that he saved their lives. Her gratitude makes him pause as he realizes that she views him as someone who rescued them. He admits that he believes he did almost nothing, yet he thanks her for the kindness. Luke then inquires about the samurai and wonders whether she survived. Sylvia confirms that Sakura recovered completely, which brings him relief. He reflects that he never wants to fall asleep again in a situation where someone he tried to help ends up dying. Sylvia studies him closely and suddenly voices her suspicion that he might be an unusually strong healer. Before Luke can respond, her uncle steps inside and answers on his behalf, stating that Luke is just a third-rate E-rank adventurer whose only skill is repair. Sylvia pushes back, insisting that his repair skill worked impressively. Luke tries to move but feels his strength drain, and he mutters that he feels like he is dying. Sylvia quickly concludes that he is starving, and he admits that he has consumed nothing but water. Shocked, she hurries off and returns with hot food. Luke eats and enjoys the meal while Sylvia remarks on how unexpected his rescue was. She explains that she never imagined someone would reach them at the bottom of the dungeon. Luke assumes she had been near the entrance, but she corrects him and mentions that they were 5 floors deep. Luke realizes they are misunderstanding each other and requests clarification on the exact name of the place where they met. Sylvia states that it was the E-rank dungeon called Sundial Forest and describes, "It is an open-type dungeon shaped like a large amphitheater." Luke becomes certain that he had been inside the Iraq dungeon, the ancient Thousand Years Passage. This leads him to conclude that the two dungeons must have overlapping or linked floors. He then asks what they had been doing so deep inside. Sylvia explains that they were gathering medicinal herbs. Luke thinks this is dangerous for beginners and wonders why no one stopped them. Sylvia clarifies that Sundial Forest was officially recognized as a dungeon only last year, yet people had always entered it for herbs and vegetables. Luke points out that official recognition means monsters should be present, especially since they had encountered a real dragon. Sylvia reveals that neither she nor the guild had any idea a dragon existed there. Luke finds it odd that the guild missed such a thing. He admits he understands how a small monster might escape notice, but a dragon feels impossible to overlook. He reassures her that he does not intend to blame her, since she was also at risk. Sylvia shifts the conversation and asks for his name. Luke introduces himself as Luke from White Wolf Wood, and notes that commoners like them usually use the names of their birthplace or occupation instead of formal family names. Sylvia begins asking what brought him into the dungeon, but before she finishes, she realizes he has already fallen asleep. She gently covers him with a blanket and thanks him quietly. Luke wakes the next morning and heads for a bath. The hot water brings life back into his body, and he feels refreshed. He thinks about Sylvia's explanation that Green Hollow is famous for its hot springs, and the constant access to warm water suddenly makes sense to him. After bathing, he steps outside and feels completely awake. He walks along the street and observes the people moving around. The atmosphere feels peaceful, almost like a town built for rest. Food stalls and small restaurants line the main street, and the whole place feels ideal for someone drained in both body and spirit. Someone calls his name, and he turns to see Sakura approaching. She appears relieved to see him looking well, and mentions that Sylvia told her he had gone out to explore. Luke recognizes her and checks her condition, and she explains that she has recovered fully because of him. He reflects on how strange it is that she encountered a dragon while gathering herbs. Sakura admits that the situation bothers her because, as a warrior in training, relying on someone else feels frustrating to her. She mentions that her favorite katana snapped during the fight and realizes that she is using that as an excuse for her weakness. He asks about her sword, and she presents the 2 broken pieces. He examines them and states that he can fix it easily. Sakura appears relieved because the town has no weapon shop, and she has been stuck without a weapon. Luke assures her that repair work is his specialty. Sylvia arrives soon after and watches them from nearby. Luke notices her staring and feels a bit startled, but she admits she was simply curious and asks whether she may observe. Luke tells her it is fine, though he warns her that it might not be exciting. He also wonders whether her workplace needs her, but she explains she is on a break. Luke studies the sword carefully and lets its information flow into his mind. He observes its strength, its metal composition, the layered steel, and even the reduction in cutting power. He realizes that the ability to read this information evolved from his repair skill. He thinks back to when he touched the berry in the forest and recalls how the details appeared in his mind just like this. He gives this part of the skill a name in his mind, analysis. He understands how it works now. He analyzes the damaged sections, breaks them down mentally, identifies the exact materials needed, and reforms the structure to restore the item. The process feels like the skill has formed its own independent system. Luke finally finishes the repair and announces that the katana is restored. Sakura asks if it is ready and addresses him respectfully, which makes him feel awkward. He decides not to make a big deal out of it. He thinks about her situation and concludes that she likely does not have much money as a trainee warrior. He remembers she saved his life too, so he treats the repair as a gesture of gratitude. Sakura expresses deep thanks. Luke then asks whether she has another source of income. She admits she does not. Luke suggests that she try becoming an adventurer, explaining that adventurers take quests whenever they want, which lets them choose their workload and schedule. Sakura realizes that this fits her situation perfectly. Sylvia mentions that the town has a guild house and that her childhood friend works at the reception desk. She also mentions she has business with the guild, so they decide to go for Sakura's registration. They all head there together. They arrive at the guild house and the receptionist notices them immediately. Sylvia introduces Luke and explains that he has business with the guild. The receptionist, Marita, glances at Luke and jokes about giving discounts to handsome newcomers, which flusters Sylvia. Marita then turns to Sakura, asking if she is there to register as an adventurer. Luke confirms that Sakura wants to join as a novice. Sakura bows and explains that she is inexperienced, but wishes to become an adventurer. Marita reassures her that all new members start as novices. The local danger levels are low, so new adventurers often come here first. Marita hands Sakura the registration form, telling her this is the first step toward joining the guild. Marita begins explaining the adventurer ranking system. There are 6 ranks from F to A, and everyone begins as F. Advancement comes from completing quests, and each higher rank grants access to dungeons of equivalent or lower rank. The higher the rank, the more opportunities become available. Marita also clarifies that party danger levels are determined by the leader's rank, making careful progress important. Sakura listens closely while Luke observes quietly. The receptionist checks a note about the dragon incident and confirms that the novice who defeated a dragon on the 5th dungeon level is present. Luke casually acknowledges his involvement, and Marita starts the paperwork for a cash reward because such a feat must be reported to the main office. Sakura explains that she was only able to slay the dragon because Luke repaired her sword. Marita remarks that cutting down a dragon in one strike is extraordinary, but Sakura insists she is still a beginner. She asks how the reward will be split, and Luke realizes that many adventurers nearby are already watching them. He notes that the attention may complicate things, but decides to proceed. Luke explains that he wants to take a break from adventuring for a while, and is looking for a suitable place in town to open a weapon shop. The suggestion shocks everyone around him. It surprises him too, noticing that even new adventurers cannot ignore a rumor once it spreads. They are all aware now that the person capable of repairing the sword that defeated a dragon is planning to open a shop. He offers to use part of the dragon slaying reward to acquire the building. Marita, Sylvia, and Sakura look at him carefully, processing the unusual plan. Luke assures them that money is not the issue as he can handle the cost, but the building itself is barely standing, little more than a dilapidated ruin. Sylvia asks for clarification, pointing out a location on the outskirts of town, and suggests consulting the mayor. Marita confirms that the structure is almost beyond saving. Our boy declares that it can be fixed. He feels confident because repairing structures falls within his expertise. Sakura immediately insists that he should use her share of the reward as well to restore it, overriding any hesitation. Luke considers the insistence, recognizing that no argument will change her mind. He accepts the contribution, feeling grateful and acknowledging her determination to help. Sylvia proposes framing the payment as an advance for urgent repair services, which allows our boy to accept it professionally. Sakura agrees, treating it as a legitimate transaction and adding a further request. She wants Luke to craft a katana, one strong enough to match the original dragon-slaying sword. Luke thinks it over and agrees. Although accepting her money initially feels awkward, he reminds himself that the arrangement is a formal contract, making her his first customer. They shake hands, sealing the agreement. Luke realizes that this moment marks the beginning of a new chapter in his life. He will step away from the dangerous life of an adventurer and dedicate himself to building the weapon shop. This marks the start of his transition from a wandering adventurer to a craftsman and business owner, using his skill in a controlled and productive way. From that point, Luke takes a hiatus from adventuring and begins the scramble to establish his new life as the owner of White Wolf Arms, preparing to turn his abilities into a sustainable trade while laying the foundation for a safer, more independent future. The group then reaches the building, and our guy stares at it with dismay. Sylvia informs him that the building has been vacant for a while. One day, a strong gale brought a huge tree down on it, leaving everything inside badly damaged. Luke insists they won't know until they try, declaring that he will give it a shot. When Sylvia questions what he means by giving it a shot, he clarifies that he means repairing it. He admits he has never tried using the skill on something this large but expresses cautious optimism. His thoughts reveal that the repair's target will be the entire building, and that he will use magic to compensate for sections that have rotted away. The girls watch in shock as Luke activates the repair skill. Cracks begin sealing themselves, and Sakura feels stunned as the building restores itself before her eyes. Sylvia watches in amazement, telling him he restored it perfectly and calling him incredible. She notices him huffing and checks whether he is all right. He responds that he is finished, his thoughts acknowledging that restoring an entire house consumes enormous power. He recognizes that a weapon shop needs inventory to sell and remarks that he cannot afford to wear himself out already. Sylvia immediately offers to clean the place at the very least, warning that if he handles everything alone, he will collapse again. Sakura adds that she wants to help as well. Luke accepts, apologizing for putting them to work. Sylvia begins by opening a box of weapons, stating she will start with the shop's stock. She mentions that she bought them cheaply from the guild. Luke acknowledges this, admitting that he knows it looks like a pile of junk, broken weapons and battered armor. He activates the repair skill on them, explaining that to him, this is treasure. He demonstrates as one item becomes indistinguishable from a brand new sword. Sylvia and the others grasp his strategy at once. Repairing damaged weapons costs far less than stocking entirely new ones. Luke confirms their understanding, explaining that this is exactly why a weapon shop suits him. He adds that they will need an eye-catching featured display next. When Sylvia asks what he means by eye-catching, Luke elaborates that he used the sword that slew the dragon for publicity. Without items like that, customers will leave disappointed. Sylvia questions whether he will be able to make more swords that impressive. Luke admits that the ones going on display will be replicas. He explains that he disintegrated the original dungeon material and ground it into fine powder. Creating another sword of that caliber with such a small pouch remains impossible. Sakura asks whether it is the same material he used before. Luke confirms it, explaining that the substance dramatically increases blade strength. He calls his acquisition method a trade secret, then activates the repair skill again and applies it to another sword. Sylvia observes its beauty, noting that its shine carries a different quality from ordinary weapons. Luke announces he will finish repairing the rest, thinking that once preparations are complete, he will need to plan how to secure more materials. Sakura expresses surprise, admitting she never imagined this would be his path with the guild. Luke responds that he gave the idea a great deal of thought, then poses a question. He points out that there is already a weapon shop in town, so what new adventurers truly need here? Sylvia answers that they need weapons and armor. Luke remarks that she comes from a merchant family. Sylvia shares that her grandmother always taught her to find gaps in the market. Luke's thoughts reveal that he has never told them what happened before they met. Sylvia wonders why he was not an adventurer earlier, especially given his apparent talent for restoration. Luke explains that he only realized the full potential of his skill very recently, then recounts everything about the hero. Both girls react with shock, calling it cruel and awful. Sylvia's thoughts reveal an urge to slap him across his evil face. Luke realizes that if he mentions the man as a hero, their anger will only worsen. Sakura declares she would have cut him down on the spot. Luke explains that the reason he clung to being an adventurer was longing. His thoughts drift to childhood, when parties of adventurers passed through his village. Hearing tales of their exploits planted that yearning inside him. He acknowledges that many stories were exaggerated, yet even so, he could not abandon the dream. His parents dismissed the idea as foolish, and his rebellion eventually drove him to leave his village. That is why he remained an adventurer for so long, even as a perpetual E-ranker. Sakura asks whether he ever regretted it. Luke responds that he stayed because he genuinely enjoyed it. That final quest became a wake-up call and a chance to start anew. He acknowledges that he owes that mission his awakened ability, and now he can live quietly as a weapon seller. Sakura agrees enthusiastically, urging them to work hard to prepare the shop. Luke plans to order the sign, and once it arrives, he will begin repairing the remaining stock. Just then, a boy arrives and asks whether Luke saved the girl from the Spring Leaves Inn. Luke confirms it was him. The man explains that he knows the inn's family well and hands over a box of hot stew, offering it to the house. He mentions that many townsfolk are eagerly awaiting the shop's opening and wishes Luke good luck before departing. Luke asks whether he truly wants nothing in return, but the man insists it is their treat. Luke reflects that during his adventuring days, no one expected much from him or thanked him at all. The feeling is not unpleasant, and he eats. Nearby, Sakura interacts with several children. She tells them honestly that sword arts are not meant for display. The children persist, insisting that no one will mind and asking her to show them more, calling swordplay cool. She relents, agreeing to just one more demonstration. She performs a strike that shatters an object into fragments, leaving the children stunned. Luke watches from a distance, equally shocked. His thoughts note 2 slashes executed in an instant. Achieving that demands not only speed but refined technique. He concludes she must be a skilled swordswoman. Sakura declares that it was easy for her. Luke's thoughts comment on what happened to sword arts are not for show. The children respond enthusiastically. She notices Luke and asks how long he has been there. He admits he arrived when she mentioned sword arts not being for display. She explains that in her homeland, public demonstrations are discouraged, so praise like this is rare. Luke responds, noting her embarrassment, that he understands. She was simply excited to perform. He adds that several stall owners gave him stew for free as well. She thanks him and tastes it, declaring it delicious. Luke observes how much she enjoys eating. Her thoughts wonder whether it was that obvious, and she admits she has suffered one humiliation after another since meeting him. Luke disagrees, remarking that he finds it endearing. Staying composed matters, but so does letting go. She thanks him for saying so, explaining that her hometown is extremely strict, so she tends to overindulge in freedom here. Luke asks whether she is a warrior in training and whether she plans to stay in Green Hollow for long. She reveals that she is returning home briefly and will leave tomorrow. Luke expresses surprise at how soon that is. She explains that she hopes to make this town her base, but first she must retrieve something. When he asks what she left behind, she reveals it is a special material she wants him to use to forge a sword. She will bring it back herself, assuring him not to worry. He promises to surprise her with the best shop she has ever seen. She responds that she is genuinely looking forward to it. Later, outside the shop, a worker asks Luke where he wants the sign placed. Luke, along with Sylvia, confirms the location is perfect. The worker asks whether the shop's name comes from his birthplace, mentioning White Wolf Woods if memory serves. He confirms this, admitting he could not think of anything better. He adds that he has been meaning to thank her for all her help, expressing sincere gratitude. Sylvia responds by reminding him that he saved her life. She suggests they simply enjoy the fact that so many people are eagerly awaiting the opening. He agrees, acknowledging that this is where everything begins. The worker announces the sign is finished, marking the end of preparations. Luke and Sylvia stand outside the shop and welcome everyone, announcing the grand opening of White Wolf Arms. Luke later reflects on how quickly he's adapted to running the shop. Despite opening not long ago, business flows steadily and dealing with customers has become second nature. A customer approaches, inquiring about swords available for 1 florin. Luke shows him the selection, confirming that 1 florin covers more than enough for their regular iron swords. The customer expresses relief at the reasonable price. He thanks him for the purchase as the customer leaves satisfied. Sylvia emerges from the back, commenting on how busy things remain as usual. Luke greets her warmly, noticing she carries something. She explains it's a present from Marita, who runs the bar as a side business. Everyone in town feels overjoyed because they've grown significantly more powerful thanks to the materials harvested from the dragon corpse. He examines the bottle, realizing this gift serves as both a thank you and a belated shop-warming present combined. Sylvia shifts the conversation, curious whether he's sold any of the featured replica swords yet. Luke admits no sales so far. The replicas aren't exactly priced to move quickly. For now, they function purely as decoration since most people can't afford to pay that much. Sylvia points out these are only replicas, suggesting he could charge even more for the actual sword. Luke agrees completely, estimating he could probably charge several sovereigns for the real thing. Sylvia's eyes widen at the mention of multiple sovereigns. She notes that amount equals what ordinary folk earn in an entire year. Luke explains he can't make another sword like that one easily anyway. The problem lies in needing to return to the thousand-year passage to Hell to gather more of that unique material. However, entering requires an air anchor leading the party, making the whole endeavor pretty much impossible for now. He concludes he can't go collect more material and has no intention of selling the original sword anywhere either. Sylvia agrees it seems like a bit of a waste, but understands the situation. Luke points out that adventures rarely have that kind of cash to drop on a single sword anyway. The shop door suddenly swings open, and two men enter. One addresses Luke formally, asking if this establishment is famous for the Dragon Slayer sword. The other waits silently. Luke confirms this is the place, but hesitates. The buyer smiles, expressing strong interest in purchasing the sword if Luke has it available. Luke directs them to similar blades in stock over the display. The buyer dismisses these options, clarifying he wants the original sword, not poor-quality replicas. Luke feels caught off guard by the direct request. He explains carefully that the original hasn't been put up for sale. The buyer laughs, asking if Luke wants to keep it as a souvenir. He acknowledges understanding that sentiment, but insists he has specific reasons for wanting that particular blade. The buyer gestures to his companion, who promptly places a stack of gold sovereigns on the counter. Other customers in the shop freeze, staring at the display of wealth. Luke's mind races. 5 sovereigns just sitting there. He wonders who this person actually is. The buyer studies our boy's reaction and decides the offer isn't sufficient. He raises his hand again, and his companion produces even more coins, stacking them higher. The buyer asks pleasantly if this amount allows them to reach an agreement now. After the men leave, the shop door slams shut. Luke exhales heavily, commenting on how exhausting that interaction was. Sylvia immediately begins counting the coins spread across the counter. She reaches 5, 6, 7 gold sovereigns total. Luke doubts those men were adventurers, and no adventurer shells out this much cash so casually. They might have been knights or noble envoys based on their bearing and resources. He notes that at the very least, the buyer seemed to be a real connoisseur, since he saw right through the quality of the replicas instantly. Sylvia agrees, recognizing the man definitely wasn't ordinary. She wonders aloud why someone like that would come all the way to Green Hollow. Before they can discuss further, Sakura arrives at the shop, greeting them cheerfully and mentioning it's been a while. Both our dude and Sylvia light up at seeing her. Sylvia rushes forward, expressing how tired she got of waiting and how much she missed her friend. Sakura apologizes for taking quite a while to get home. Sylvia mentions she's actually back earlier than expected and asks if she brought the material. Sakura confirms she did, explaining she really wanted to show it to Luke, so she came straight here. Sylvia notes the good timing since she's about to break for lunch, and asks if she can take a look once they have eaten. Sakura agrees enthusiastically, saying she'd really appreciate that. They settle down for a meal together. Sakura tastes the food and declares Luke's cooking the best she's ever had. Sylvia mentions Luke has even been hired to restore some of the buildings in town. Sakura responds with amazement, expressing how astounded she feels by how much the place has improved beyond her imagination. The shop also seems to be getting a lot of customers. Luke confirms business comes from people who aren't adventurers as well. Sylvia credits this success to how well he fixed up the ramshackle old place. Luke suggests the shop itself serves as his biggest advertisement. Sakura expresses confidence that, from the looks of things, he'll earn back his startup fees in no time. Luke reveals he's actually earned most of that money back already. Sylvia interjects excitedly, reminding Sakura about the sword used to defeat the dragon. It just sold for 10 sovereigns. Sakura's shock shows clearly on her face as she questions who on earth those people were. Sylvia admits she doesn't know, speculating that rich people often want weapons with a lot of prestige. Maybe that explains the deal. Sakura comments that someone could be set for life with that amount. Sylvia laughs, noting that's taking austerity a little too far. Luke agrees they're all just making guesses since they can't know the truth now. He suggests they talk about Sakura's blade instead. Sakura produces the material, which sparkles brilliantly in the light. She explains this is what she wants him to use for making her katana. Her people call it Haihiro Kon. Luke admits he's never heard of it before. Sylvia observes it looks like a gemstone, but recognizes it as metal. Sakura confirms this, revealing that one of the goals of her journey was finding someone capable of forging a katana from this material. Luke asks if no one in her hometown could do it. Sakura explains sadly that not even in the East does the knowledge exist anymore. The techniques have been lost. No new armor or tools can be made from this material now. Luke examines the material closely, asking if she's certain she wants to entrust something so valuable to him. It's such a precious material. Sakura responds with conviction that there's no one she'd rather trust it to. Luke accepts the responsibility but warns that this will be complex and might take a little time. Sakura asks what he means by complex. Luke explains the process simply. His repair skill uses the memory of an object's original shape to make it whole again. Since repair is his only skill, he can't just make a sword from raw ore right away. Sylvia follows the logic, understanding that repair only restores an object to its original state. Sakura grasps the problem. He can't create a blade from metal ore alone. He clarifies it's not impossible, strictly speaking. If he recomposes half the ore bit by bit into an existing katana until it learns the shape, then decomposes the katana and the rest of the ore together, he can recompose it all at once. This method would create a 100% pure high hurricane blade. He admits it's kind of a cheat workaround. Sakura asks excitedly if he can really do it, if it's actually going to be possible for real. Luke responds that the theory sounds solid, though he's never actually tried it before. Sakura urges him to do it as soon as he can. She hands over her katana, requesting he use it first to make her a 50% blade, then afterward remake it to 100%. Luke accepts the challenge, noting that if this is what she wants, he'd better not fall short of her expectations. He raises his hand over the materials, announcing he'll try a 50-50 blend of the original katana and the High Hero Kone first. Both women watch in amazement as the process unfolds. Sylvia comments on the pretty color. Sakura marvels at how the blade glows pink as cherry blossoms. Luke holds up the finished result, observing how combining it with regular metal creates this light and striking color. Sakura asks if she can take it outside for a while. Luke agrees, but reminds her to watch out for other customers. After Sakura leaves, Luke remarks that she doesn't look at it, but she's a big kid at heart. Sylvia teases that this observation makes him sound like a dad. Luke protests, asking if she's calling him old. Outside, Sakura raises her finger and fire emerges from her fingertip. Luke watches through the window, impressed that she can use fire magic. Sakura explains it's still only a low-level skill, so she can't use it for direct attacks. However, items made from High Hurricane reportedly conduct fire and amplify its intensity. By channeling her magic through the blade, she can test if the process worked properly. Luke finds this amazing and suggests testing it on something. As fire builds up along the sword, he points to a chunk of wood nearby but warns her to watch out for the shop window. Sakura swings the blade, and the fire-enhanced attack launches forward, obliterating the wood chunk at a distance. Sylvia watches in shock. People gathering around the attack area also stare in disbelief. Sakura thanks Luke profusely, calling the result incredible. Sylvia hesitates before pointing out that Sakura just called that a low-level skill. Luke agrees, realizing he might have just made the most absurdly overpowered weapon in history. He wonders what would happen if someone used a higher-level fire skill with this blade. Just how strong could it become? Even a short time ago, he never would have imagined being capable of making something like this. The whole situation feels so unreal that someone like him could craft a weapon of this caliber. Sylvia comments this is exactly what she'd expect from a sword Luke made. Sakura looks absolutely thrilled with the result. She requests that next time he make her a short sword as well, since she wants to dual-wield it with her katana. Luke agrees readily, thinking to himself that he never thought he'd have friends who appreciate his skills like this. Later, a customer approaches from behind, mentioning he'll come back if anything breaks again. Luke assures him he'll be waiting for the business. He glances at his to-do list, confirming that's all of today's jobs completed. Creative energy burns through him so intensely that he can't sit still. Maybe he'll head back to the shop and fix some more weapons. Speaking of weapons, didn't Sakura mention wanting a short sword? Perhaps he can make it now and surprise her with it. He might try changing the ore ratio a little while working on it too. Two knights suddenly appear behind him. They address him formally, asking if he's Luke of the White Wolf Wood and requesting a moment of his time. Luke's nerves spike immediately at their official presence. The knight addresses Luke, introducing himself as part of the Order of the Silver Wings. Our main character, unfamiliar with the organization, smiles politely and mentions he typically handles repair requests at his shop. The knight grows irritated, questioning how long Luke plans to play ignorant and warning that his patience wears thin. Luke stares back, genuinely confused about what the knight means. The knight notices Luke looking away and grabs his shirt, demanding he stop underestimating him and calling him a low-life criminal. Another knight intervenes from behind, urging his companion, whose name is Garnet, to ease up. This second knight, Felix, warns Garnet that aggressive interrogation only distorts the truth. Garnet snaps back, but Felix reminds him of the chain of command, threatening to report his insubordination to Lord Carmine. This mention immediately changes Garnet's demeanor as he begs Felix to keep his brother out of the situation and apologizes to Luke for the rough treatment. Felix removes his helmet, revealing himself as the vice commander of the Order, and requests Luke accompany them for an important discussion. Luke questions what happens if he refuses. Felix explains matter-of-factly that refusal constitutes obstruction, which means they would simply force him to comply anyway. Seeing no real choice, Luke agrees to continue the conversation inside his shop, since their presence attracts too much attention on the street. Sylvia appears from inside the shop, clearly alarmed by the commotion. She approaches Luke, demanding to know what's happening after hearing the shouting. Luke admits he has no clear idea either, though the situation obviously doesn't look good. He tries reassuring her that they're just going inside to talk. Sylvia insists she can't possibly stay calm when customers are already whispering among themselves. She announces she's coming along. Luke nervously asks Felix if this creates a problem. Felix allows it, explaining she'll need to give consent to serve as Luke's official witness, since she seems quite concerned about him. Once inside, Felix gets straight to business, mentioning they're aware of what transpired in the dungeon. Garnet requests Luke describe each member of Hero Falcon's party. Luke seems puzzled by the request, so Felix clarifies they just want his personal impressions. Luke begins recounting what he knows. Falcon tended toward overconfidence, and whenever pride caused him to make mistakes, he'd rely on his numerous skills to fix problems. Julia the Knight was Falcon's childhood friend and lover who followed his every command, though she only ever challenged him when it involved other women. The white mage Blanc was the one who proposed abandoning Messi and generally rubbed people the wrong way. As for the last member, Luke admits he struggles to say much. Felix prompts him about the white mage Noir, asking if they had some kind of conflict. Luke clarifies it's actually the opposite. Noir had such minimal presence that he honestly can't describe what she was like. Felix acknowledges this information before Luke turns the question around, asking why they need to know about the party members. Felix decides to reveal the truth directly. Falcon and his entire party are currently missing in action, and the Order of the Silver Wings is investigating their whereabouts. Luke expresses surprise, mentioning he hasn't heard anything about this, and previously informed the guild they were probably still inside the dungeon. Felix confirms they're aware of that report, then drops another bombshell. The fact that Luke left the dungeon without his party has led to accusations of foul play. He explains that the ministers sponsoring Falcon have made serious claims. They believe Hero Falcon died due to Luke's betrayal, and they demand he be interrogated for details. Sylvia immediately stands, protesting that the accusation is absurd and completely out of character for Luke. Luke sits frozen in shock. Felix calmly tells Sylvia to settle down, acknowledging her feelings but asking her to let him finish. He continues explaining that the ministers also believe Luke stole the hero's weapon, the Dragon Slayer's sword that was specifically assigned to Falcon for retrieving. Luke starts mentioning the sword has already been dealt with, but Bradford cuts him off, realizing Luke was the one who melted it down. The revelation clicks for Luke. That's how the Order had the funds for this investigation. It was a politically assigned mission. Felix confirms the minister's reasoning about the sword proved false, but now a different problem has emerged. The sword Luke made contains mithril. Both Felix and Sylvia react with shock to this revelation. Sylvia asks what mithril even means. Felix explains it's an extremely precious metal with terrifyingly high magic affinity. Gathering it requires royal palace permission, and selling it without authorization can result in the death penalty in the worst cases. Sylvia gasps, pointing out that Luke repaired the sword using material from the dungeon walls. Luke confirms this, explaining the caves must be composed of this substance, at least partially. He couldn't properly analyze it because he'd never encountered that particular metal before. Felix acknowledges that since Luke's production of a mithril weapon wasn't intentional, he can't be charged with a crime. However, there's a catch. If Luke truly made the sword from the dungeon wall, no one could have known about the mithril vein beforehand. To prove this, Luke must designate part of the dungeon wall with witnesses from the Order present. Luke agrees, reasoning that if this clears up any suspicion, he's willing to cooperate. Still, he wonders aloud how Felix could possibly think he'd betray Falcon in the first place. Felix clarifies that only the ministers hold that belief. He smiles, noting that in terms of ability alone, betrayal seems impossible since Luke holds E-rank status with only a repair skill. Luke points out that the guard outside, Garnet, certainly seemed convinced of his guilt. Felix explains that Garnet harbors intense hatred for mithril bootleggers, which probably explains his hostile attitude. Luke accepts this explanation, and Felix confirms they'll escort him to the dungeon to collect rock samples from the wall. Later, outside the shop, Garnet approaches Luke with a completely different demeanor, smiling and expressing how much he's counting on Luke today. Felix seems taken aback by the sudden shift. Luke shakes hands with him, thinking how bizarre this total attitude change feels. The kindness seems even weirder compared to earlier, and while shaking hands, Garnet squeezes Luke's hand painfully hard. He leans in, warning Luke that today they'll expose his lies completely. Sakura suddenly arrives, and Garnet immediately tells her to back off, declaring that outsiders have no say in official business. Sakura counters that she's not an outsider since Felix gave her permission to accompany them. Luke apologizes to Sakura for making her act as both bodyguard and guide. She responds cheerfully that she's happy to help. Garnet smirks, making a snide comment about typical E-rankers always needing protection. Felix immediately reprimands him, reminding Garnet they've already discussed this behavior, and threatens to report him to Lord Carmine if he oversteps again. Garnet relents, claiming he'll be serious from now on. Luke casually mentions that Garnet should listen to his boss, who also happens to be his big brother. Garnet seems surprised Luke figured out the relationship. Luke explains that when Felix threatened to report him to Carmine, Garnet responded by saying to leave his brother out of it. Luke adds that being a perceptive E-ranker means he's quite good at listening for useful information. Garnet dismisses this, claiming it's not an actual skill. Luke continues, piecing together that since the vice commander reports to the commander and that's Garnet's boss, everything makes sense now. Garnet seems baffled that Luke remembers all these tiny details. A knight approaches and announces the vice commander is ready to depart. Luke observes Bradford, noting how incredibly tense the man appears. They arrive at the dragon remains in Sundial Forest. Luke takes in the scene, noting how many adventurers wear such light armor in a place where a dragon appeared. He wonders whether they're courageous or foolhardy. He turns to Garnet, asking if he's wearing full armor because he's scared of the dragon. Garnet shouts defensively that he's not afraid. Luke moves closer, reassuring him there hasn't been a single eyewitness report of another dragon. Garnet insists again he's not scared, and demands Luke stop mocking him. Felix calls Garnet's name, and one of the other knights observes that it almost looks like Luke and Garnet could become friends. He guides them to the dungeon entrance, identifying it as the 1,000-year path to hell. Felix notes it really does connect with the other dungeon they investigated, and mentions they'll need to examine the lower levels as well. Luke recalls there was a wall near the bottom of the steps and leads them there. Felix confirms this is the wall Luke used for the repair, noting that at first glance it appears to be ordinary stone. However, since it's part of the dungeon, the wall should be virtually indestructible. He asks Garnet to test it. Garnet agrees, turning to Luke and declaring that if he knocks the wall down, it proves Luke is a fraud. Luke responds calmly that he's well aware of what's at stake. Garnet activates his skill and swings his weapon at the wall with full force, but the wall doesn't break. Luke asks what Garnet thinks now. Garnet admits the similarity to rock is only superficial. Inside, it's like a cluster of metal. Not even a hero could break through this material. Felix tells Luke to proceed. Luke positions himself in front of the wall, thinking how this takes him back to the worst month of his life. He just wants to decompose some of the wall and leave. Our guy activates his skill and places his hand on the wall. Immediately, cracks spread across the surface. Felix watches in shock as Luke breaks the dungeon wall so easily. The wall crumbles apart. Luke then demonstrates recomposing the rubble, explaining this is exactly how he made the sword that slew the dragon. He had no idea the material was mithril or anything unusual. Felix asks Bradford to collect some of the debris. He then requests Luke dismantle more of the wall at different points. Luke questions whether this is totally necessary, admitting he'd rather not go any deeper. Felix explains they can't be certain of every wall's composition, so they need samples from multiple sides. Garnet teases Luke, asking what's wrong and whether he's scared, suggesting he'll abandon them the same way he supposedly abandoned his party. Felix immediately tells Garnet to stop, then addresses Luke more gently. He understands Luke's hesitation but would really appreciate his help, since they're doing this for Luke's sake. Luke acknowledges he knows this and reluctantly agrees. After collecting samples, Luke looks at the bag of metal pieces and expresses relief that they finally have enough and can leave. Garnet complains about how dark, narrow, and depressing the place was, questioning how Luke survived 2 weeks down there. Luke points out he wasn't down there for fun. Sakura smiles and tries to lighten the mood. Felix explains they'll take the medal back to have it appraised, though the results may take some time. He promises to contact Luke as soon as he hears anything. Luke thanks him and confirms he'll be waiting. Luke suddenly has an idea, suggesting Felix take some dragon bones as souvenirs for the other knights. Sakura agrees it's a great idea. Garnet faces away, muttering that he doesn't care what they do, and announces he's heading home. He then asks Luke mockingly if he even remembers the way back, calling him annoying. In that instant, Luke senses something wrong. Before anyone can react, a massive dragon hand crashes down, striking Garnet directly in the face. Luke shouts in shock, asking what the hell is happening. Garnet's armor flies off from the impact. The dragon releases a deafening growl while Felix screams Garnet's name in horror. Just then, a swarm of wyverns suddenly descends from the sky. People scatter in terror, screaming for help, and shouting that they stand no chance against these creatures. Felix calls out Bradford's name urgently. Bradford responds immediately, activating his chain of binding technique. The chains shoot out and wrap around the dragon, forcing the massive beast to crash down. Luke watches in amazement, impressed that Bradford managed to take down so many creatures with just a single skill. Sakura launches herself into the air, activating Swift Dash as she soars upward. She lands directly on one of the wyverns and draws her sword, striking at the creature while maintaining her balance. During the fight, another dragon appears behind her without warning. Luke shouts desperately, trying to warn her to look out. Felix reacts faster, swooping in with his skill to save her from the attack. Sakura acknowledges her debt to him gratefully. Felix observes the giant dragon before them, noting this one appears different from the others, more dangerous. He announces that he and Bradford will provide support while leaving the finishing blow to Luke. He instructs Luke to get himself to a safe distance. Luke agrees outwardly, but internally he beats himself up over his pathetic state. Even though his skill has evolved, when it comes to actual battle, he remains completely useless. Still, he decides he must do whatever he can in the moment. His attention shifts to Garnet lying injured on the ground. Luke notices the heavy blood loss but confirms Garnet still breathes. He rushes over, calling out to check if Garnet can hear him. As Luke examines the injuries more closely, his stomach drops. Garnet's face has been almost completely crushed by the dragon's attack. Luke wonders if there's still time to help, thinking if he ignores the armor and focuses on healing the body directly, he might have a chance. A sound behind him interrupts his thoughts. Luke realizes the dragon's breath attack reaches all the way out here. If they don't move immediately, they'll be caught in the direct range of the assault. Even if Luke manages to escape, Garnet won't survive. Luke stares at the situation, recognizing this as a sink or swim moment. He draws his sword, formulating a desperate plan. If he makes the dungeon wall his repair target and uses the earth as raw material to compensate, he might be able to pull something off. Our dude activates his skill immediately, thinking bitterly about how someone who was abandoned for being useless now faces the choice of abandoning someone else. That thought drives him forward. He focuses intensely as he uses the skill, commenting that the result isn't bad, considering he's never attempted something like this before. Luke places his hand on Garnet, muttering that Garnet better be ready to apologize for every single time she bit his head off. He concentrates, willing Garnet to come back. The healing takes effect and Garnet's form begins to restore from its injured state. However, Luke suddenly senses something unusual. One of Garnet's chest plates has been destroyed, revealing her actual body. The shocking realization hits him. Garnet is a woman. As she regains consciousness, Garnet's eyes snap open. She mistakes Luke for the dragon and slams him away, jumping to her feet and declaring she's going to kill that bastard. Our boy calls her name urgently, begging her not to try moving yet. He explains he fixed her wounds but couldn't restore the blood she lost. Garnet reaches up to check her injuries, then notices her exposed chest. She covers herself with her hand, realizing what happened and becoming extremely shy. She acknowledges that Luke saw everything. Luke admits he couldn't help it and had no idea she was a woman. Garnet turns away from him, clearly embarrassed. Luke offers to repair her armor, instructing her to just turn around so he can fix it from behind. While working, Luke's thoughts race. Garnet can indeed be both a man's or woman's name, but no one would ever guess that under all that armor exists a woman's body. Once Garnet covers herself properly, Luke announces the repair should hold for now. He points out they're not on the front line anyway, so they can just wait for Sakura and the others to finish off the dragon. Garnet surprises him by asking why he doesn't question why she was hiding her gender. Our boy responds casually, assuming she doesn't want people to know for her own reasons. If that's the case, he won't force her to explain. Garnet clenches her fist and shouts his name. She bows her head, acknowledging she owes him an apology. She admits she was pretty rude to him before. Luke suggests it was because she thought he was smuggling mithril. Garnet seems caught off guard, asking who told him that. She figures it must have been Felix, complaining that he always sticks his nose where it doesn't belong. Luke reiterates that she doesn't have to tell him anything she doesn't want to share. Garnet responds that she won't make excuses. If her mother knew she was still clinging to her pride like this, she'd be furious. Bowing deeply, Garnet expresses her most sincere gratitude for healing her. She admits she would be dead if it weren't for Luke. Luke smiles, commenting that he had no idea she could be so forthright. He declares everything is water under the bridge now. Even him seeing something he shouldn't have seen. Garnet grabs him roughly, demanding he forget about what he saw no matter what. Luke quickly clarifies he wasn't talking about that. He meant her face being exposed. They both hear a sound in the distance. Luke recognizes it as the sound of the dragon being defeated. Garnet seems frustrated she didn't get the chance to pay the dragon back herself. Luke suggests they head back to meet up with the others. He extends his hand forward, asking if she can stand. Garnet rises on her own, insisting she can stand just fine without help. Luke points out that her helmet is gone and asks if she's okay meeting up with the others like that. Garnet explains not to worry since Felix and Bradford have seen her face before. Luke realizes she's sulking about something and pieces it together. Neither of them knows she's a woman. Garnet confirms this, explaining their order has a stupid antiquated rule that only allows men to join. Luke's thoughts click into place, remembering Felix previously referred to Garnet using male pronouns. Garnet explains she's been pushing the idea that she's the commander's little brother to maintain the deception. Luke can't reveal this secret to anyone. Luke reflects internally that her reason for wanting to be in the order must be significant if she's going so far as to hide her gender. While he admits curiosity, he recognizes it's none of his business. As they walk, Garnet suddenly stops. Luke asks what she sees. She points ahead, asking if he notices what she's seeing. Luke follows her gaze and spots a huge hole in front of them. He didn't notice anything like that on their way here. Garnet wonders if this might be the reason for everything that happened. Luke looks closer, noticing ivy covering much of the area. He figures the ivy was probably covering the hole when they passed through earlier. Garnet's expression changes as a terrible thought occurs to her. She brings up the dragon that appeared in Sundial Forest, trailing off as the implication sinks in. Luke recalls something gigantic bursting out while they were heading down into the cave. He agrees that most likely the dragon came out of this hole, and the guild wouldn't have noticed the hole hidden there either. Garnet urgently states they really need to warn everyone. She suddenly notices something strange. The hole starts closing. Luke recognizes this as a pretty common trap mechanism for dungeons. However, if the mechanism extends out here, that means the dragon must be part of the trap itself. Garnet asks if he thinks someone is controlling the dragon. Luke admits he doesn't want to consider that possibility, but his mind works through the logic. If he's right, there must be a switch somewhere that activates the trap. Luke spots something near the closing hole, a person lying on the ground. He calls out that there's someone right by the hole entrance. Garnet realizes the danger, warning him to wait. Luke moves forward urgently, insisting they need to check. Garnet reluctantly agrees, but demands he come back quickly. Luke reaches the woman and crouches down, asking if she's okay. The woman stirs and rises up slightly. Luke feels relief that she's still conscious. As he gets a better look at her face, recognition strikes him. It's Noir. Luke asks if it's really her. She responds weakly with his name. Luke questions what she's doing out here, mentioning he heard the rest of the party hasn't returned from the dungeon. Noir suddenly fills with fear and throws herself at Luke, hugging him desperately. She repeats apologies over and over, crying hysterically. Luke tries to calm her down, asking what happened to the others. Through her trembling and tears, Noir manages to convey that everyone is in the dungeon. She shakes uncontrollably as she tries to continue. A sinister voice cuts through, commanding Noir to keep quiet unless she wants to suffer. Noir immediately collapses to the ground. Luke reacts with shock, asking what just happened. He checks on her frantically, begging her to hang in there. The voice speaks again, declaring that no one will be able to free her from this curse.
Here I am, know it's been a while. I was in denial about my love. Here I stand, I know I walked away.